So, welcome to Personal Finance Reimagined. I'm your host, Jeff Hulett. At Personal Finance Reimagined, we're obsessed with the why and how behind the choices that shape our life. We are a decision-making and financial education organization dedicated to turning high-stakes hurdle into high-return opportunities. So today, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Dave Urso. Dave is Vice President of Academic Affairs at Blue Ridge Community College. So there are two major reasons why this discussion has been circled on my calendar for a while. So thing one is really around the college return on investment equation. So for many, the college choice is that first big decision of their lives. It's high stakes, high reward, yet it's often navigated by 17-year-olds without a true roadmap. So at PFR, we help families from middle school through all the way through college ensure they aren't overpaying for the value they receive. So from my standpoint, community college is absolutely a powerhouse for achieving that ROI, and Dave is at the center of that mission. So then thing two is, as a faculty member at James Madison University, I see firsthand how this sister institution bond we share with Blue Ridge Community College, whether it's students transferring to JMU or it goes the other way too. JMU grads heading to Blue Ridge for specialized certifications. This two-way street is a model for modern education. So Dave, we have a lot to dive into in regard to the future of education and smart decision making. But before we jump in, could you bring us into your world? Just tell us a little bit about what it truly means to lead academic affairs at Blue Ridge.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm super excited for the opportunity to be here and have this conversation with you. What you're doing to boost the community is so important, and I think having these conversations earlier is a difference maker. Rewriting the script of my own life, sometimes I wish I was thinking about some of these things in different ways and really pushing myself in some of those spaces more meaningfully. So I cannot credit you enough with the laser focus you have and the good work that you're doing for all of us. I grew up just outside of Philadelphia, southeast of the city there. So lived my formative years there before coming down to JMU, actually. I'm a double Duke, so graduated twice with there before headed out to Colorado State University, where I was able to get a doctoral degree and have been working in the community college ever since. Just passed actually this month I will hit 21 years in the community college system. So long time watching the system evolve a little bit and things like that in different roles, student servicing roles and academic affairs since 2012. And really saying on the academic side, how are you making curriculum that's meaningful and things like that. So always happy to talk about our mission. One of the things that you allude to that I hope underpins the entire conversation we're about to have is a lot of people say, where you're positioned in the Valley. You have JMU and Mary Baldwin, you have Bridgewater and EMU, you have you guys in PVCC and UVA, you have Shenandoah, you have so many schools. Is it tough to be that cutthroat? And I said, I don't look at JMU as a competitor. I look at them as a collaborator. And I think when we talk about education in the Valley, we can say that about a lot of us, is that we come to the table saying, how do we have an educational solution for the Valley, as opposed to saying, are we competing for the same students? And I think that reframes it for a lot of people.
I think that's brilliant, Dave. It's funny. It makes me think of when I have conversations with folks in a similar but slightly different way. I'll talk about the state of Virginia. So I'm a JMU grad. I actually did my graduate work at Virginia Commonwealth, but I've had a great opportunity to be at many of the institutions in various various capacities and getting to know all of them. And I have to tell you, top to bottom, Virginia has an amazing higher education system. I would argue on par, if not better than either all or most of the other states in our country. So when I talk about college ROI, I have a little bit of an advantage, right? Which is we have an amazing state system that really enables, that whole notion, right? It's like, come to Virginia. I always get amazed. I'll tell this story sometimes. So as you can appreciate, at JMU, the number one state of residence is Virginia students, right? Of course, because they get the in-state tuition. But the number two, which would be the number one out-of-state school, is the state of New Jersey. And I've always been amazed. And when we talk to the Jersey kids, they'll tell us, Virginia just has so many options top to bottom. And for whatever reason, New Jersey, they have some great schools there, but it's just not the same. So they export a number of their kids. So Virginia has truly become this sort of import mecca, so to speak. And again, you're part of an ecosystem that to me is you got JMU and Blue Ridge, of course, in the Valley, but then when you go wider, it's truly blow away. So anyway, so thank you for that. And so one
Sure.
of my first question, I guess, is we had a little bit of I've had conversations over the years, and I remember one thing that you brought up that really stuck with me. That you mentioned that the community college system sometimes faces almost like an identity crisis, where you're balancing a massive state system with the need to be hyper local, high speed, very focused on the valley, and of course all the folks that you serve. So how does being, and I think you called it the smallest medium college, but how do you sort of balance sort of the more like the central part of what the role that you play being part of a larger system, but also then focusing, of course, on the needs of your community there in the Shenandoah Valley?
Yeah, and I think that you highlight that the juxtaposition there really well, right? Is this idea of going, if you think all the way back, and we won't nerd out on the history of it, right? But why community colleges were born, it was this construct of saying, can you serve the community? And, we're in a valley where you have the turkey farms and you have processing plants and things like that, and going, okay, who's saying this isn't? Bachelor's and master's degrees used to be for the elite because they were the thinking degrees, right? And they said, well, where do the technical degrees, where do the skill degrees fit? And you saw the emergence and evolution of what that was. Now, because of how things have evolved for better and for worse concurrently, we're served by saying, what are the outcomes and what are the efficiencies by being a centralized system that makes sense to be able to do? How can we serve more students? How can we get more funding? How can we reach better success? So what can we learn from colleagues in Northern Virginia and Tidewater and Danville about where they're finding success that we can replicate? But still saying what manufacturing looks like at Hershey isn't necessarily what manufacturing looks like at Northrop
Right.
Grumman. So how do we make sure that if we say we took these students who are interested in manufacturing and put them through a local program, they have to be ready to contribute to the local employers. So being the smallest medium college, our job is to go out and know our employers better than anyone and say, how are we the best possible teammates of a centralized statewide system, while also saying we are fiercely protective of delivering curriculum that resonates for our industry and helps our students be immediate contributors into the jobs they'll get on graduating.
Right. Okay. No, that's so interesting. And I kind of see it too is, and what I'm hearing is your focus is hyper local. Because when I think about like a school like James Madison, they produce a lot more graduates than the Valley could absorb, right? I mean, there's 25, well, not quite 25,000 students, and a lot of them, maybe they go to Northern Virginia, but they go up and down the East Coast. They go all over the country, sometimes all over the world. So I like that, the way you're saying it, because what it makes me think of is while JMU certainly loves the Valley and is an important community member of the Valley, its focus probably isn't quite as local as yours is, and which I think is just which makes it even more special to me.
And we're legislatively drawn a little bit different, right? If you think about what it is, imagine if we went into Waynesboro and drew a line down the middle of Waynesboro and said, JMU, you can recruit from this side, and UVA, you can recruit from this side. It would never happen, right? But for
Okay.
us in PVCC, you do have that footprint where they say, this is your team to serve. These are your counties, these are your cities. And that lets you be a little more collaborative because we go, you're not going to come into my space unless we've agreed it makes sense. And I'm not going to come into your space for the same reason. So you are able to a little more say, how can we do what's better? Because we talk a lot to the PVCC colleagues and say, we see this happening in Stanton. How do we uplift that whole community through something that maybe you're doing well, but we can't afford to start up based on what the graduates are? How do we deliver it to our students? And I think that's why it becomes important to say there's a niche of what we serve that makes sense. We have JMU excels in so many ways. Keeping their graduates local is not their call to flame or call to fame. Sorry.
Right. Yep.
So it's that idea of going, we can go in the local hospitals and go, we just want you to be aware 95% of our nursing graduates are going to come right back into these local hospitals. 30% of JMU's nursing graduates are going to stay here in the footprint. So just as we think about relationships, how do we make sure we're meeting the broadest possible set of students and getting them served?
So I'm thinking back to one of our other discussions too, and there was a really interesting statistic that totally surprised me. So I think, and I think falsely now, but I think of it like the relationship from high school to community college to a four-year institution as being kind of a linear progressive path. But what you shared with me is, oh no, about I think the statistic was 25% of your nursing and med tech students already have a bachelor's degree, and they're basically coming back to community college. So could you talk a little bit about, I guess the different pathways that people take and what and how you service those pathways?
Yeah, it is. I think it's myth busting a little bit for some people when you talk about those numbers. But we sat down and said, okay, people expect that the community college, there are stigma. There's big stigma. There was in Pennsylvania when I grew up. There is in Virginia as well. Of the community college is just this, but like anything else, I think it looks and feels different than it did before. And when we talk about students who couldn't get into a four-year institution, I think that's not who our primary student population is anymore. So you have
Right.
career-focused individuals who are coming in. Our two largest competitive admission programs are nursing and veterinary technology. So I sat down and was talking to the leadership and said, but I think we have a lot of students admitted this year who I'm talking to who are saying, oh, I already got my biology degree from JMU, or I already got my business degree from Radford. I'm coming back. So we actually ran the numbers, and it's 22% of our nursing students and 24% of our vet tech students are getting an associate's degree in their field with a bachelor's in hand already. We
Right.
didn't drill down to go, do you, and I'm hesitant to use this word, so I hope it doesn't come off how I don't mean it. Do you regret going to get that bachelor's to then come back and get an
Right.
associate's? Or did that give you a foundation that made you more successful coming into this place?
Right.
But it'd be great to dive in and really understand that in a little more depth, but knowing
Yeah.
that greater than 1 out of 5 of these students already have a bachelor's degree in hand when they're coming into this program, there's something to be understood there. Maybe to your initial point about going, did we ask them at 17 to make a decision? And they weren't quite solidified on what that plan was going to be. So they did what was expected at the
Right.
cost of where they would ultimately go.
So you mentioned a word, and I'm gonna read the word back to you. You mentioned the word stigma, and I completely agree. I didn't really think about it when I was growing up so much, but I hear it, I see it. I think it's still there. Maybe it's getting better. I don't know, but it's always it's confuses me why that is and especially in the context of college return on investment and things like that. So but I want to give you a quick story. So and why how the myth was busted for me. So I've had a number of different roles in my career and involvement at JMU. And one of my roles was I was a lead recruiting partner at a big four accounting firm called KPMG. And we were, hiring not only accountants, but finance, CIS. I mean, really a very broad suite of JMU students for advisory, tax, accounting, et cetera. So, but my point is, we would, you know, figuring out who to recruit isn't as easy as you would think, right? And what I mean by that is there is a lot of focus on grades. And it used to be that, hey, get a good grade, get a GPA north of 3 point whatever, and you're just going to just be better off. It's going to be easier. You're going to be more likely to be recruited, et cetera, et cetera. So that's always been a little, and that's still true. JMU and colleges don't give away grades, right? But on the other hand, the challenge we ran into is that from our standpoint, hiring out of college is like really expensive. We need the student
Hey,
to stick around for a couple years, right? And so here was the challenge. Here's what we figured out was if we had a student that transferred, say, from Blue Ridge, from community college into JMU, they got the four-year degree, their level of resilience, their level of quality when they landed at our firm would basically vastly increase the likelihood that they would be that employee that would stick around for a number of years, would provide great client service and all that. So we had gotten to the point where we were actively and still do actively recruit and look for 2+2 students, right? But there is a problem. There is a problem. There's not enough of them. That was literally our problem. That was our complaint. It was like, hey, JMU, we love this. We want more of these students. And they're like, well, we just don't. You're,
Yeah.
you're getting as many as we can give you. And so, and that's when I came to realize that it's not as normal a path, right, as perhaps it should be, could be. Maybe that's going to change. Maybe with artificial intelligence, maybe with costs and the cost of college growing as it is, maybe that's going to change. But anyway, so that's my story, and I'm sharing that story with you more to help me understand why is the stigma there, how do we defeat it, and if there are firms like mine that are actively recruiting people, how can we get that word out, right, and sort of break through the stigma and go from it's a stigma to being it's a way to supercharge your career.
So I think it's such a fascinating question, and the way you laid it out, I think makes a lot of sense. The stigma is sort of like an onion to me, right? Is that as you peel the layer, you see that different people have different stigma for different reason, right? So part of it was this stigma of going, do I perceive the community college as high school with ashtrays, right? So that was one of the things. So for a long time, it was the community college is just high school with ashtrays, and you're like, that's the misunderstanding of what it was. So I'll try to go philosophical and then come back to practical if that makes sense. But
Sure.
I grew up in envelope manufacturing. That was where my family cut my teeth. That's where my dad spent his career and things like that. And I think you had a similar stigma to all of the idea of this skilled warehousing and manufacturing was these were dusty spaces with old machines and you were dirty at the end of the shift and things like that. And then the community college felt into that. If you're preparing people for the trades, you're probably also second class in some capacities. But now flash forward to the manufacturing and warehousing spaces of today, and you
Right.
see they are all iPad driven and drones and computers are in place. And if you get to the Amazon distribution warehouse, there are not as many people as you think there because there are belts and hooks and robots who are doing so much of the work. So this idea of going, what are the skilled trades is also not grounded in reality anymore. So I think if we went into a traditional high school class of juniors and said, tell me what a skilled tradesperson day looks like, it would be the antiquated mythical model in the 90s of what these people were doing. But there's really been an evolution of what it means to be serving in these skilled trades spaces, and they look and feel fundamentally different. So I always said if I could do anything I want, it would be, how do we tell this high school junior or senior, here's what it's like to experience a day in the life of a bricklayer, a day in the life of an electrician, and a day in the life of a phlebotomist, not walking around in a career fair where we have 700 organizations and they spend 30 seconds with each saying, hey, what does your heavy equipment operator do? But instead is to go, did you know that once you step into that excavator, you actually have GPS signals and screens all over the cab who are doing that? Do you know the field is moving to the place where they're saying most heavy equipment is actually going to be operated remotely from somebody in a control room who's sitting here more or less, Jeff, playing a video game, moving this thing in real time as they scale and get the things right. So I think the trades were stigmatized. The community college became known as the pathway to the trades. So the stigma then jumped with it.
Right.
Add to that, to your point, and I think we'll end up talking about this deeper in the conversation, the community college's choice to intentionally market themselves as the more affordable option.
Right.
That's read by a subset of the population as cheap.
Yes.
And when your tagline is I'm cheap, people are going to make assumptions
right.
about what that means. So I could stand on the mountaintop and say, our faculty are held to the same standard as they're held at JMU.
Right.
Our faculty are serving in the same ways. But as soon as you market for decades as we're the cheap alternative,
right,
there's going to be a decision people make when that's the story you're telling.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. So I bring in my personal finance class at JMU and, in all of our personal finance classes we teach at a number of universities, we bring in, really well-known ideas from different people. So one is from Warren Buffett, and most people know who Warren Buffett is. He's a great global investor, has been around for a long time. He actually just retired from Berkshire Hathaway. But one of his pithy homespun sayings is, price is what you pay, value is what you keep. And
that's great.
What what Warren's really saying is that's and he's really making a statement about the challenge, which is price is the easy button of value. You think perhaps because you're paying more for product A than product B, that must mean that that one of the products is just higher quality because you're paying more for it. And of course, as an economist as well as just an observer of life, that's just not true. It's
Right.
so not true.
Sure.
But I think you just hit it on the head. Marketing yourself as the lower cost alternative, yeah, does come with a cost, right?
Sure.
And that's so you'd like to think people are pretty wise, they can figure out. One of the things I always tell people is like, look, you know, let's take a class, Psych 101. Is the human brain hardly changes. Our knowledge of psychology, while it's evolving, while it's getting better, in Psych 101, the actual class itself really hasn't changed a whole lot. Do you think it makes sense to pay 90% more for Psych 101 at one university than another? And if so, why? Right. And so that's when you really get into okay, like what are we talking about here, right? Like what is it? And maybe you could make that case, but I think it certainly makes it, it frames the case, right, in a way that to me it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's a point there. Maybe that's not really where I'm going to get value, so to speak.
And
So,
for people who see societal value in that, I am not hesitant when recruiting and saying, but I want to be a JMU grad. I want my degree from JMU. I said, I
oh,
get it. There is never an asterisk on a single transcript that says JMU grad by way of Blue Ridge. So it
yep,
is never like your degree is going to say, I
yeah,
got some classes in my bucket somewhere else before I
right,
came in and was able to make this more. And I think that's so much of what it is. It's this laser focused piece of what it is. I have
right,
twin sons. They're 16. We're going through the college searching process now. One of my sons is like, a lawyer this day and a fashion designer tomorrow and an entrepreneur the
right.
next day, which is great. Like he knows he's college bound and things like that. My other son will be like, I am not going to sit in a history class after graduation. I am not going to sit in a math class after. And I think part of that is sometimes where the community college can better tell our story as well, to be like, you can get higher education and not get back into the gen ed space at all. There are pathways to come in and study something you are deeply interested in only. We'll take the noise away. We'll take those. You don't want to do another biology class, not anti-biology in any way, but you don't want to do another lab science. There's a way to come in here and focus exclusively on machine management and mechatronics to be able to do it. We'll get you graduated. We'll get you paid. We'll get you paid well. And we'll get you on your way to taking care of your family down the road like you want.
So one of the things that we've talked some about before, and this is another one of these perhaps myths, or I think is a myth, but the whole idea of the notion of college material, right? And so I'll just give you an example. So when we're in high schools and we teach provide this college decision making curriculum, one of the things that we really emphasize with the students is there's really no such thing as college material. Or another way to look at it is I'll look at the students and they're going to be, all makes and models of students, right? And I'll say each of you is college material. There is a college for you in this country. There is no doubt about it. I just because you're here, I know that for sure. College is not a college material question. It is actually a now or not yet determination, right? It's just at 17, does it make sense? And does it make sense to go to a 4 year, to a 2 year, go the trade route directly, perhaps the armed services, gap year, go to work, whatever it is. But that's what we're really working on. And that's really our message, right? It's let's get out of our head. It's college material. You are all college material. We just have to decide what's right for you right now at 17 years old, right? And so I guess I'm just curious, like, how does Blue Ridge Community College think about this, or are they aligned with this, and how do they change the narrative for a high school student about, how they think about, their own confidence and their desire to go to college?
Yeah, it's interesting. one of the things that's unique about the community college, didn't step foot on a community college campus until I was in graduate school. And I'll recall that the president at the time of the institution I went to stood at graduation and said, the 4 years are able to find success by standing at the front door and saying, you can be with us, you can't, you can be with us, you can't. And then they talk about the fundamental change that they made. The community college stands at the front door and says, come learn with us and we'll meet you where you are to get you there. And I was like, I'm hooked, I'm in. This is the mission that resonates to me.
Right.
But as I've been able to advance as a leader, I said, now I have to be a fierce protector of people who buy into that mission. So when I hire, I'll always say, do you think every high school graduate is college material? And it's a little bit of a trap question because I want to see where they go, because what the conversation that instills after that question is I'm willing to ride with you to say every high school graduate is not college material. But every person who graduates from high school is post-secondary educatable. And I think that's the distinction of going, it may not be traditional college, it may be college material. People get stuck on college as opposed to stuck on my education has ended. So whether you're teaching me how to weld, whether you're teaching me how to drive a truck, or whether you're teaching me how to be an engineer, there's still more learning to be done. Like this construct, you talked about Psych 101 earlier. No Psych 101 teacher on earth would be like, we're done learning at 17. That's it. Like your brain is tapped. Like we know the brain doesn't even start to even actually frame type until 24 to 26, right? And we know it still refines into our 30s and 40s. So this idea of going, you can't turn off learning. The question is, knowing what you know in terms of self-identity, how do you frame learning to make it as meaningful as possible for where you are on that journey? And I think that's what we try to bring in staff who are skilled at telling that story to make sure people felt heard. For a long time, the community college had credit and non-credit as two different sides of what it was. So if I wanted a fast credential, I would come in door A, and if I wanted a traditional degree, I would come in door B. There was a strategic decision made about 3 years ago that said, we're going to scrap all that and we're going to hire a team of onboarders who simply talk to the student without an agenda and say, what do you want? This is actually the training that makes most sense for you in terms of what Blue Ridge has to offer. And sometimes we say, we're not your answer. Your best answer is to go to JMU right away, or your best answer is to go to MTC and their night program because this makes more sense for you. So it's that collaborative piece we talked about before, but when we get away from saying I have to capture every enrollment I can and instead say I have to serve the student, it's amazing how many of them will tell you, I don't care what you call it, credit, non-credit, clown credit. I just need the skill so I can get the job and get paid.
Right. I love that. It's so practical in that way. It can clear up a lot of hesitance, I think. So I have a question about, so I speak with the transfer folks at it seems like most four-year colleges have have a transfer focus, right, where they connect with the community colleges as the pathway as required by law, right, going from the community college into the four-year institutions and what classes are going to transfer, all that kind of stuff. But one of the things I've come to appreciate is that there's some friction. It's not the easiest thing in the world. And I think this relates to sometimes to, I wouldn't call it stigma, but some of the hesitancies sometimes is like, wouldn't it just be easier to go to a four-year college? That way I'm there all 4 years. I don't have to worry about transferring. I make my friend group freshman year and I'm done kind of thing, versus I do that at community college. Then it's like I got to parachute into JMU or Mason or UVA or wherever. What could, or what does your relationship with the 4 years institutions to help in that process to get people more comfortable to go through the community college, so they know that once they do transfer that there is a pathway, and that pathway is very doable?
So it's a great question, and I'll try to kind of speak to the economics side of your brain first on what that is of going. We couldn't run the applied programs the way that we do without the transfer bound students to help, right? Because our nursing program loses $500,000 a year in terms of cost to deliver versus what we generate back from tuition and student fees. Our aviation maintenance program loses $300,000 a year. Our history program makes $900,000 a year. So if all the history students just went directly to their 4-year and didn't use us as a stepping stone, our books would not be able to balance, right? We'd have to fundamentally alter the way we're delivering education to the Valley. Your point, though, is so well taken. And in this era of inclusionness and cohort-based learning and things like that, we have seen a lot of strides in saying, how do we make transfer pathways feel better? Last year, in around this time, 2025, we launched a program called BR to JMU, where we had the first ever group of 43 students who were admitted to both institutions concurrently and told essentially, you are JMU students, but you're going to go full-time to Blue Ridge for 2 years as long as you keep this GPA. But they functioned as a 40-person team. So they said, we got this team basketball tickets. So they came to the basketball game. So they were building that cohort, but they'll also transfer as a collective as well. And when they do that, hopefully you have some of that consistency that's a little broken down. 4 years across Virginia are so intentional about how they let incoming students transfer in and get seamlessly integrated into those institutions that they will. We just ran some data to talk about how our transfer students are successful. And most students who transfer out of Blue Ridge into our regional 4 years, more than 94% are able to finish their next degree within 3 years. So when we talk about their ability to stay focused, get that degree finished, and get back to what's next, we're seeing huge levels of success. The social integration piece, I think, needs to be continued to monitor because we don't want them doing that feeling isolated, but the wins are certainly there.
That's amazing. And I think that's it's an evolving and growing opportunity, maybe I should say that. I think we do a great job or a very good job. I think we could even do a better job, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure.
And it sounds like I love it that it's the focus, right? To me, that's what matters. And you guys will get there. So one of the questions I have, and this is something you and I have talked about also before, is what I'll call the ethics of education. And so one of the things, like when I spend time with high school students, we'll talk about thinking about return on investment in terms of, well, what kind of job are you going to get when you go here? So, do you go to college? What's the end goal? And that's a really hard decision for a 16 or 17-year-old, right? They're like, I don't know. I'm too, how could I possibly know? And so it is a difficult question to answer for sure, but we spend time on it. It's more the way of thinking about it in terms of, look, America has a lot of great jobs and a lot of great things that are growing. We have some things that are not growing that maybe don't have the level of salaries, et cetera, that you need to support yourself. So the idea is do a little research on that, figure out what the high demand and higher salary jobs are, and then position yourself to get the education necessary to get that. So to connect the outcome with the cost of the process to get to that outcome. And so my reason for bringing that up, that's something that we focus on a lot. And it has as much to do with the whole idea of really focusing on demand as a way to create satisfaction, right? And our whole perspective is if you're doing something that's in demand, you're likely to get good feedback, and good feedback leads to you liking something because we like it when people give us good feedback. And so anyway, so it becomes, it's almost the opposite of the causality error. So many people have always said, oh, you have to learn what you like first and then get a job in that. And we kind of take it the opposite, which is actually look what's in demand, figure out how to get into that, and like will likely follow, right? So anyway, but with all that said, and again, this whole notion of the ethics is how do you guys think about, like I could imagine there could be programs that perhaps people are buying into that you kind of look at and go, you know what? This is kind of a dying thing, or this is a thing that doesn't have the level of salary that I think would create a living wage. How does Blue Ridge balance that, right? In terms of really thinking about, well, what is the growth areas and how do we support our students to get, to position themselves to get jobs in those growth areas?
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating because you're seeing this generation of college students who's more debt mindful than I think historically that we've seen, right? Historically, at least in my generation, talked about, I have 200 grand in debt, I have 250 grand in debt. And then it
Yeah.
was a wish and a prayer, right? That you would have a plan. So I think we see people being more intentional in making that decision, but it's still going, did you see it all the way to the finish line? So I think there's always this funny moment during orientation here where I tell the students, like, all right, how many of you are here against your will? And a third of the hands go up, and we tell the joke, like, okay, you shouldn't be in here against your will because you're less likely to be able to do uh, be successful program. And some, the hands will stay up, and I go, the average childhood educators in the Valley are not making nearly the money you think, right? You might be in the high 30s or the low 40s. So what are you making now at Dairy Queen or Buc-ee's or in this job that you're doing? And unfortunately, as a society, we don't value and uplift early childhood educators. So are you going to invest in a degree that you're not going to get the return? Say, okay, those of you who had your hands up for I'm here to make more money, how many of you are considering coming into our plumbing program?
Right.
Well, you know what plumbers make in the Valley? They can make 5, 6, 7 times as much as what that is. But someone told you that the traditional degree is the fast track to make more money. You can make more money and get out of college in a hurry if that's what your overarching goal is. If you're willing to put up with what that is, if you're willing to be a roofer and spend your days out in the sun, like there's a lot of money to be made there, but it comes at a cost. But are we eyes wide open on what these lived experiences are? That person who's in childhood education, can we have the conversation to go, what draws you to that field? Is there a parallel field that accomplishes the same thing like social services, but it's going to be compensated different? And or how are we lobbying as a community to say we believe in our early childhood educators? Can we get the salary up that's proportionate to what we require to enter? Because if it requires a degree to enter my facility as staff, we should then acknowledge what the salary value is of asking someone to be able to do that. I shouldn't earn a degree to be less able to help my family get out of poverty than I was prior to me getting that credential.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. There's always such a disconnect, I feel like, between what we say we think is important versus what we actually pay for. And
Yeah.
that's always a challenge. And it's funny, I used to get more righteous about that, right? Like, and say, well, why aren't we doing this? And at some point it's like, you know what? We don't. And so let's focus on helping the students to really understand and what the opportunities are so they can at least make the right decision, I mean, and make sure that
And
it's a decision that makes sense for them.
and that's the tough theory piece, right? It's because I feel like I have found fundamentally early childhood educators have huge hearts. So they go, because I believe in this mission, I'm willing to be underpaid. But as long as you have people who are willing to fill these spots underpaid, you're never going to move the needle to say we should appropriately acknowledge what's happening here.
100%. Yep. No, you're right. Well, Dave, this has been amazing, and honestly, I feel like I have a lot more questions. So maybe we could have a follow-up sometime. But
Anytime you want.
oh, that is so awesome because what you're doing at Blue Ridge and what Blue Ridge is doing in general is super powerful in the Shenandoah Valley and even broader. So I asked you a bunch of questions, but let me ask you as a kind of a two-pronged question of wrapping up here. One, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to share that you think it's important for understanding in general? Which of course I'd love to hear about. And then finally, if people want to learn more about Blue Ridge or wanted to connect with you or connect with others at Blue Ridge, just how do we go about doing that?
Sure, yeah. One of the things that you said earlier, which really resonated, was is it not right or is it not right now? And I think I would just encourage people to see them as a continuum and not an either or option, right? So it's that idea of going, if you're going the traditional high school, the traditional college experience is not right now for me. My challenge to you would be, can you come to a 6-week non-credit program that makes sure in the interim, as you're exploring, you have a skill that you can take in to be able to do something, whether it's driving a forklift, whether it's working as a phlebotomist, because we'll continue to hit that, or whether it's in our pharmacy program. You can get a really quick half the summer credential that will set you up to be able to have a job in that gap that either tells you, yes, I'm on the right field, or no, I want to go back and get a bachelor's degree because it's going to open additional doors down the road. But the idea of saying, I'm just going to take my high school diploma and sit and see what life brings me feels like the least proactive option. So I'm saying, while you're still in that mindset, can you come in and say, can you give us just a small window to get something in hand for you that makes sure that you have options and choices to make? I think that would be the difference maker. And if people want to learn about Blue Ridge, our website is www.brcc.edu. You can connect with our chat folks on there. You can connect with our onboarding team. You're welcome to contact me personally, and I'm happy to talk to you about the things we're doing here and how I might add value as well.
Well, thank you, Dave. This has been a fabulous discussion, and I do look forward to talking more in the future.
Good. Thanks so much, Jeff.